You finished the show. You sat still. Not because it was sad, because it was true. Na Hee-do and Baek Lee-jin loved each other completely. You saw it happen. You felt it happen. And then the timeline said no. Not a villain. Not a misunderstanding. Not anything that could be fixed by a better conversation or a braver choice. Just the specific shape of two people's lives in a specific historical moment that made their future together structurally impossible. The internet said the ending was a betrayal. It wasn't. It was the most Korean thing the show could have done. It honored the love by refusing to lie about what the world does to love. When it decides, it has other plans. This is K-Logic. And today, we decode the 2521 algorithm. 2521 aired in early 2022 and became one of the most discussed Korean dramas of that year, primarily because of its ending. The backlash was significant. Viewers felt betrayed. The romance between Na Hee-do and Baek Lee-jin had been built with extraordinary care across 16 episodes. Their chemistry was undeniable. Their love was complete. Their story felt like it was heading somewhere permanent. It didn't go there. The show's ending revealed that the two leads did not end up together. Not because of a dramatic event, not because of a character failure, but because the specific economic and professional pressures of post-IMF Korea in the early 2000s took Baek Lee-jin to New York and kept him there. And the two people simply grew in different directions until the relationship could no longer hold its shape. The Western reading of this ending, a failure of narrative courage. The writers took the easy way out. They should have found a way. The Korean reading, the most honest thing the show could have done. Because 2521 is not a love story. It is a story about what happens to love inside a specific historical moment. The IMF crisis, the specific Korean experience of a generation whose lives were restructured by economic forces entirely outside their control. And what the show is actually saying is that the historical moment was not a backdrop. It was a character. The timeline that separated Na Hee-do and Baek Lee-jin was not random. It was the specific shape of Korea in the early 2000s, the financial crisis that restructured careers, that sent people abroad, that made the futures people had planned for themselves structurally unavailable. The ending honors that reality, and in honoring it, the show becomes something more than a romance. Algorithm 1. Han as the show's structural engine. Every element of 2521 is Han, but Han of a specific, generational kind. The show is set against the IMF financial crisis of 1997 to 1998, the specific Korean trauma of a generation that had done everything right, that had followed the system's rules, and that watched the system collapse anyway. Baek Lee-jin's family loses everything. His father, who built a company, is reduced to someone who cannot provide. Lee-jin himself enters adulthood with the specific Korean Han of someone whose future was restructured by forces entirely outside his control. This is not backstory. It is the show's central operating condition. The love between Na Hee-do and Baek Lee-jin develops inside this Han. Inside the specific emotional intensity that comes from two people finding each other in a moment when the world has made both of them unusually raw, unusually present, unusually unguarded. The IMF crisis stripped away the social armor that Korean professional life normally requires. And in that stripping, something genuine became possible. The ending is the Han completing its logic. The crisis that made their love possible, by stripping away the protective layers, by making both of them present in a way normal life doesn't permit, is the same force that eventually separates them. The world rebuilt. The armor went back on. The specific conditions that produced their love could not be sustained indefinitely because the conditions themselves were crisis conditions, temporary, unsustainable, and structurally finite. The Han is not the separation. The Han is the recognition that the most vivid love sometimes requires the specific conditions of a world coming apart, and that when the world reassembles, it reassembles differently. Algorithm 2. The Underdog Algorithm without the resolution. Na He-do is the show's most precise execution of the Underdog Algorithm. She is not the best fencer. She works harder than anyone. She competes against opponents with better resources, better training, better institutional support. She loses before she wins. And when she wins not because the system finally rewarded her, but because she refused the system's verdict on what she was capable of. This is the Underdog Algorithm in its cleanest form. Not the dramatic martyrdom of the Six Ministers, not the patient business strategy of Park Sae-roy, but the daily, unglamorous, poly-fueled discipline of showing up when the system has already decided your outcome. The show pairs this with the ending deliberately. Na He-do wins at fencing. She achieves the thing she worked for. And she does not get to keep the love that sustained her through the achievement. The show is making a specific cultural statement, that the system's verdicts are multiple, simultaneous, and not coordinated. You can win one game while losing another. The Underdog Algorithm delivers on the fencing court. The timeline delivers elsewhere. This is not pessimism. It is the most honest thing Korean drama can say about the relationship between effort and outcome. That effort controls what it controls, and the rest is the shape of the world you're living in. If this analysis is decoding the Korean dramas that stayed with you longest, subscribe to K-Logic. The ending is never just the ending. The algorithm is always underneath. The backlash to 2521's ending was largest outside Korea. This is not a coincidence. Korean audiences, raised on the Underdog Algorithm, fluent in Han, accustomed to dramas that refuse cheap resolution, process the ending as painful but honest. International audiences, many of whom encountered Korean drama through the lens of romantic resolution, processed it as a broken promise. Both responses are valid, but the Korean response understands something the international backlash missed. The ending is not what happened to the love. The ending is what the love cost. Na He-do and Baek Lee-jin did not fail to stay together because they loved each other insufficiently. They separated because the world they were living in, the specific economic and historical pressures of Korea in the early 2000s, required something from both of them that eventually exceeded what the relationship could hold, while also requiring everything else they needed to give. This is the show's central cultural contribution. The validation that love which cannot be sustained is not love that was insufficient. That the world sometimes asks more than love can answer. And that this is not a narrative failure. It is the most honest thing that can be said about the relationship between love and the conditions of the world it exists in. Every viewer who sat still after the ending was sitting with this truth. Not the ending's sadness, the ending's accuracy. 2521 honored something that most romantic dramas are not willing to honor. Not the love that wins. The love that was real. Na He-do and Baek Lee-jin's relationship was complete. Not in the sense of lasting forever. In the sense of being fully itself while it existed. Present, honest, mutual, genuine. The show gave 16 episodes to documenting that completeness. And then it gave the ending to documenting what the world does to complete things when it decides it needs them to be otherwise. This is the specifically Korean cultural intelligence that produced the show, the understanding that love is not diminished by what comes after it, that the relationship was everything the show said it was, and the ending doesn't retroactively unmake that. The Han of separation does not cancel the Jong of what existed. Korean drama has been saying this for decades. 2521 said it most clearly. For the viewer who sat still after the ending, who felt the specific weight of something true rather than the clean release of something resolved, the K-Logic read is simple. You were inside the show's central argument. That love which is real regardless of outcome. That the world's verdict on your future does not change the value of what already happened. That sitting still with something true is not a failure to feel better. It is the most honest response available to the most honest ending Korean drama has produced. If the 2521 algorithm decoded the ending you couldn't stop thinking about, Hit like and subscribe to K-Logic, because the most honest endings are the hardest ones, and Korea keeps making them. K-Logic will continue decoding the invisible systems that make Korean culture one of the most globally resonant forces on the planet. Because the source code was always there. You just needed to sit still long enough to read it.